Mulweni. I hope my sound is proper, and I hope that everyone is able to hear me. And I would like to greet everyone this afternoon. Thank you for joining. Hi Ntokozo. Hi Ntokozo. I'm going to start by saying Molweni. My name is Nomveli Sombanga, and I want to admit that I was running away from this seminar. It was supposed to happen last week, and last week I was like, yo, what did I do? Because it's not an easy topic to do. So I was running away from it. I just want to try something. Please give me 2 minutes to welcome the other members in. I also just want to try something. Let me see if I can. Okay, just welcoming new people coming in, and then we start. All right, so we're going to start. I was hoping to streamline everything, but it's not happening. And what I wanted to do is to first introduce myself. My name is Nomveli Sombanga, and I am excited to be part of this conversation. And I'm excited that I will be hosting this conversation. I want to try something. It's not allowing me. Technology is not allowing me. Technology is not allowing me. All right, it's done. Sorry, guys. I wanted to stream live everything on Facebook. Just so for your attention, this session is recorded and also it's public. If you don't want to, you don't have to show your face. I don't mind just talking as long as you type and I know that you're there. And also it's just going to be 30 minutes long. It's not going to be much. It's just to give you an idea of some of the content that I work with around family restoration. And also it's just my way of bringing back the conversation about the need for family restorative work. And this is going to be an introduction to that effect so that we are comfortable with the idea that families need a restoration plan, families need a restoration agenda. So this is what this conversation is going to be about. So as a start, I really just want to say thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. And thank you so much for always being present in our work. And we are growing as a business entity. We're also growing in terms of the work that we do and the focus that we have in this type of work. From the onset, I think when I started teenagers and teen coaching and supporting teenagers, it was in the line of supporting families. It was in the line of supporting the growth in families in particular ways. And along the years, expanded, and as such, I feel I have gone full cycle because when I started, I was with adults. I'm just going to hand over my hosting to Sulezi so that you kind of admit people as they come in. So please just watch the door for me and admit members as they come into the session, because I might just forget. All right, so I'm with my team, Usulezi, so she's assisting me with the admin side of things. In a nutshell, when we speak about family restoration, or when I speak about family restoration, I speak about, or I think about the work that needs to happen within our families intentionally for us to build and for us to have an intention to build. On my side, the most thing that encouraged me around this angle was the fact that I wasn't comfortable, or I'm not comfortable with the cancel culture that is often presented towards families. Like when we have disagreements with families, the first thing that people do or say, and this is more common in social media, where people say, cut them out, don't talk to them, leave them alone. Of course, there are core things that I believe, and I don't want to say, I don't want to come across as if we say, let's force it. There are things that are really important that we don't engage with some family members. But what I've been noticing quite a lot recently is the fact that you have a fight with your sibling about who cleans the room, who's working, who's not working, and then people just unmute, Nama. Please be on mute. I can't. It's Pumo. Yeah, it's done. Okay. Then the most important thing for me was I realized, wait a minute, we're going towards a wrong direction. Even the most things, it's like we are in a space where people no longer want to work towards fixing relationships within their families. We just want to cancel. And what that has led to is it has led to people living silo lives and people feeling not supported and people feeling not having a community around them and people kind of experiencing life alone. And it has also had other effects, knock-on effects as well, which I might not have all the time to talk about it today. But what I wanted to do though, I wanted to say, but those things are surface level things. there are also deeper roots to all of this. And today, I really, really wanted to acknowledge one of the big collective wounds that we have as a Black community that is often driving a lot of the interactions within our families. It's almost like a wheel that keeps churning and turning in different forms, in different ways within a family, until someone says, something is not right within this family or my family, and therefore I want to be that person who becomes a link. I'm also aware that the conversation that I'm going to have today will not speak to everyone. Not everyone is going to feel like this is for you, because not everyone is tasked to be the one that leads the family restorative work within family units. But at the same time, people are often required to follow the one that leads, because they cannot work alone. So that's the language I'm going to use: the ones who are called, the one who are tasked, the one who follow the process, because it's necessary. So I want us to acknowledge the collective wound. And people say, oh, we can't talk about apartheid all the time. We need to let go of that. No. And I'm saying that this is our collective wound. The biggest collective wound that we have as a collective unit, as the Black community, is apartheid. All around, it's apartheid. If you take it back, you can add colonialism to it as well. So how it looks like at our family units is that our family members, our grandparents, were removed. In fact, before I get there, I do want to ask, and you can type in the chat box, I want to ask, how old, which year was your grandmom or your grandparents? Which year were they born? Just write just the years in the chat box. I want to see something. I'm going to tell you now. Please write for me the year your grandparents were born, and the year that they passed away, if they passed away. And this is me hoping that people in my age group will show up, because I want to show something. Please type in the chat box the year your grandparents were born and the year they passed away. So in my case, mine were born in the 1930s, and then they passed away in the 1950s. 1939, she's still alive. Wow. Yes. Thank you, Pumu. So can everyone just write for me the year that your grandparents were born and the year they passed away? I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to write things down. The year that your grandparents were born, and then the year they passed on. The year the grandparents were born, and the year they passed on. The year your grandparents were born, and the year they passed on. 1939. Please use the chat box here. 1941. Thank you, Sukana. 1939. 1932. 1932, 1935. Thank you. And then 1940s and 1950s, I want to see. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I have the numbers. It's the 1941, it's 1935, and mostly, okay, 1930s. Okay, perfect. And now the next question is, please write for me the year your parents were born. The year your parents were born. I'm just going to write it here. I'm like, whoa, 1930s, of the grandparents. The year that your parents were born. The year that your 1950s, yes, 60s, yes. Yes, 1960s, yes. Thank you so much. 1956, 1960, 1968. Okay, so the point I want to make is that our grandparents were knee-deep in the Black labor system. These are the parents who were taken away from their village homes to work within the mines, and also within some were sent around the coastal areas, Elwandle, but to work within the black labor system. These are parents. There was a research that I was doing that mentioned that about 133,000 Black men were taken from the Eastern Cape, from KZN, from Zimbabwe, and and there are other countries, but Eastern Cape, in fact, from the outskirts of Johannesburg, from the outside of Johannesburg, about 300. I think Zambia is part of the countries. Zambia, Zimbabwe, Namibia, I forgot the other countries, but they were all taken into the black labor system because they needed workers to work the mines. So a lot of our grandfathers were given the impression that go and work at the mines, and at the mines will earn money that you're going to feed your children with. And those that grow up in the Eastern Cape, I'll make us as an example. We remember the time when a lot of our fathers, our grandfathers, we don't know where they were buried because most of them died during that process at the mines. Or those that came back, if you guys remember well, if your grandparents were born in the 1930s, if you remember well, those are the older men who came back highly violent. Those who didn't know how to interact with their children, those who didn't know how to respond in amicable ways with their partners. Those are the men that we feared in the villages because they and they came back with weird swear words like dash at all and all these weird swear words that we've never had before when we were kids, Tina. So those men were coming from the mines. And the more we grew up, we realized what was happening in the mines, that our grandfathers would get to the mines, be stripped naked and be chased by dogs and be called boys by 13-year-old soldiers worldwide. So those were our grandfathers. And I think for me, what we tend to do when we talk about history, we tend to separate ourselves as if and yet it was happening to our grandfathers, to our grandmothers. If you remember very, very well as well, and the parents or mothers who lived during the 1950s. I was doing a session with the preteens and the teens at camps because I do this quite a lot, and I noticed that a lot of mothers who grew up in the 50s, our mothers, were the mothers who were left behind during the migration also, because migration happened as well. Those are the mothers who were left behind, who took care of the households. But what we don't talk about is what they experienced when they were left behind. And these are the mothers that we experienced as cold emotionally, mothers who didn't know how to love openly, verbally, mothers that we termed angry. We labeled them as angry, we labeled them as very cold, we labeled them as very cruel. I have an aunt who still label Umawake as and those are the mothers and the grandmothers who raised us. This is where we're coming from. And then we wonder when we see the things that are happening in our communities, we wonder, because what we have not done is to look at our family units and ask ourselves, how did apartheid affect my family? We have not done that. And this is me giving us an invitation to say, I'm inviting you to ask yourselves as a family unit, as individuals, how did apartheid affect my family? Because as a collective, we know how it affected our families. We know, we read history, we follow the news, we follow politics, we know. But we have yet to ask, how has apartheid affected my family? Where was my grandfather when stuff were happening? How did it affect him? In his presence, who else was there? And how did it affect her? There was also a period where there was a lot of special branch police who were targeting villages in deep and weird ways. weird ways, to a point that we were born in trauma. I remember the day that I was born, based on the story that my mom told me. My mom gave birth to me at home after a few hours after the special branch police came to ravage my home because they were looking for my dad. My mom was heavily pregnant, and do they care? No. And then a few hours later, I was born. So we were born in those traumatic spaces, and we were born under those traumatic experiences, and we don't question, and I find that we don't question how did apartheid affect our families, and this is why we're having this conversation. I find also that when we speak about family restoration, we literally have to be the ones, because we are now in a conscious era. Our parents, our grandparents do not have the consciousness to question things as we are questioning them right now. They do not have that consciousness because they were not born in that era. Hence, you find when you ask questions at home, you are met with anger or denialism or via finger. You met with lots of because they get triggered by a lot of things that happen during their time. That creates a mental block. And whatever you get here after that, you get that, And also, parents or individuals who lived and born in the 50s, if you look at them now, a lot of them are living with mental illnesses. And this is one conversation that I would love to embark more on, because I know it, I've seen it, and I've experienced it. It is there. What is difficult, though, is that a lot of our parents didn't have the chance to be properly diagnosed and supported as such. So when we talk about how did apartheid affect my family, we need to think about how did it affect my family emotionally, how did it affect my family in terms of the spiritual makeup of my family. You must recall that a lot of families were removed from their ancestral lands. They were moved from one land to the other when the whites were creating farmsteads for themselves. So they removed a lot of our grandfathers and our forefathers from certain places and placed them in limbo. So it affected our spiritual formation as well, because it removed us from our land of formation. We also need to ask ourselves, how did it affect us mentally? What do we know mentally, logically about our families? What is there that is known about our families? And this lack of knowledge or knowing about our family, how is it affecting us in our family? There's a story in one of my family groups of two brothers, in fact, of two brothers who gave birth to children, and the families along the line did not get along because one of the brothers killed the other brother. So the families were at war for the longest time because ubaba wakho or utata wakho wabulala utata wami or unyana wami, all of that. What was then later found out, though, was that the reason why the one brother killed the other brother was that the special branch police were the ones who were creating the whole drama as a game that they were playing, where they would give your gaffers guns and they would say, shoot him. There were dogs around, there were more soldiers around, and therefore it was part of the torture schemes that they were doing during that time. Because of the shame of that era, a lot of our grandparents do not talk about the things that happened to them that forced them to have certain enactments within their family units. When that history was understood, it then becomes easier for families to heal, because then the source of anger is not this thing that we thought it is, but it is something else that is way deeper, that was out of their control, and therefore we can start to heal our family unit, because now we understand the history, the formation of our wounds. Let me check on you guys to see if it's right now. Let me know if it's right now, and if you're still following, let me know if it's right now, and if you're still following. I'm just gonna check the page. All right. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. No questions. Okay. All right. So what I'm asking us to do is that, so what made this very interesting for me is the reality that when I meet teenagers, this is something that I get asked all the time by parents. Why are you always talking to us about teens? Why are you not addressing the teenagers and the things that they do to us, or the things that they do in terms of peer pressure and? Why are you not, or why are you not reprimanding the kids? And I'm saying, and I keep saying there's a foundation in place. And that foundation determines how the individuals in that community, in that unit, are going to interact with the history of that place. So it's important for individuals in a family unit to know the history of your family unit. It's crucial because it's going to assist you in how you raise your children. It's crucial. You can't run away from it because it has a way of catching up in different ways, in different forms. I hear people say all the time, I don't get along with my parents. I don't have to talk to them, and they might have very, very valid reasons for doing so. And therefore, I'm just going to chill with my children and we're fine. Stay with my children and we're fine. What you're not expecting is that in a few years' time, your parents are going to pass away. You are going to be the parent or the grandparent, and your children are going to have kids. You have taught your kids that it is okay to not interact with the parents. Again, I'm not talking about deep issues that happen. I'm just saying things where there were just disagreements that could be solved. So we forget that our children are learning from us how to treat us. They're learning from us. How you treat your parents, your children are learning that. You can teach your children to get along as siblings and fix things as siblings. But if you are not getting along with your own siblings, you're not fixing things with your own siblings, you're teaching your children that it is okay to not get along with your siblings. It doesn't matter how much you might teach your kids to get along, but how they're watching you get along with your siblings and not get along with your siblings. And based on that example that you're presenting, they will follow suit. We tend to want to correct things with our children by teaching them verbally, not correcting our behavior, because monkey see, monkey do. We don't like that part. And yet it is a crucial part of us restoring our families. Crucial part. I am aware that sometimes people just don't know how to fix things because some things really hurt them. I am aware, but there needs to be someone who recognizes the family history and the patterns within the family. That's the other thing I want to talk about. There's the family history, and then there's patterns within families. Patterns are the previous generation, the siblings were not getting along. When you check the next generation after that one, the siblings are also not getting along. And then the third generation, we somehow think that by a miracle they're not going to get along. It's not possible until someone here decides to look at what was happening in the previous patterns and then change course. Sometimes it might mean someone standing up in that family unit and say, whatever happens, this pattern is not going to continue to the next generation. It requires a person to stand in that space and say, whatever happens, this is not going to continue to the next generation. But then when that awareness happens, that's when things change, because that awareness will come with a way for you to do things that are restorative for your family unit. I saw a comment. Now I have to see if there's a question. Yes. I'm gonna come back to that. Yes. No. So the other thing that is also quite important when we are building, I used to call this family formation, when we're forming our families and when we're restoring our families, we also have to look at the value system that has been driving the family unit. If people were cutting each other's backs, if people were betraying each other, if people were, there's a common thing that we laugh about on social media, more so around December. We laugh about how our fathers and their siblings, they fight and to the point of beating each other up when they are drunk. We laugh about that, except what it does is it's teaching the kids, this is what family does. We drink and we injure each other. It creates a pattern down in history. It creates a link until someone makes a stand and says, no, this can't continue to the next generations. It requires intention, understand, and then work that goes along with that, because as long as a pattern exists, it will be challenged by history, where the same thing will keep wanting to come back. So it requires intention and understand to say, because things are going to happen that are very similar to what created the patterns in the first place. And then the question is, then what are you going to do to try and create a stand? I can't talk about this because my family is going to kill me, but I'll say this at the expense of my siblings being angry at me. One of the things that I do intentionally is being a bridge in my family. I know for a fact that for me, that's my calling. But I know I don't do it alone. My siblings often, at different stages, we also come together and we play the role that we need to play. But there needs to be someone who intentionally stays in that gap and says, even if last month, or I can take the number for the past 3 months for whatever reason, but and therefore because of that, I'm going to stay present in working on things, because I don't want this pattern to continue to the next generations. In most cases, we call those people the family keepers, and those who are called, but they often have support, and often it's within the sibling bloodlines, because those family keepers need to keep and pass on that baton to the next person, who will then lead and then be followed in a particular way. But it also happened is that there are people that have been gifted to lead their families, because but their maturity levels were not there. Ego got in the way, and therefore they used that position to to abuse the others, or to exert their power on others, and it doesn't work that way. You literally have to be in a particular behavior mode for you to effectively lead your family. Especially in the space of family restoration. Sometimes the person who plays a role of family restoration can be a person outside of this one-time family unit. And this is where wives sometimes become family restorative keepers as well, because then they come in, sometimes intentionally so, sometimes spirit-led so, sometimes chosen, so that they become the restorative factor in this particular family. But sometimes their partners, the men, are often not wise enough to recognize that, and they mess things up, or they load more things on her than she's supposed to carry, and then she leaves. And then that family unit becomes in a much more worse state than it was before, because you have chased away the one person who was tasked to be the glue and the link, because you lacked wisdom, gentlemen. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the other thing that that intersects families is family traumas. Family traumas. Honestly, family trauma. Family trauma is, I see this happening a lot these days, and I wonder how families are dealing with it. I read a story of a man, a father who was shot. It wasn't in the week, shot in front of his children. And that's a family trauma to those kids, to the entire unit. That's a family trauma. A family trauma, if it is not handled properly, it can destroy the kids to the one in the next generation. It requires attention, it requires support. It speaks to trauma counseling, it speaks to the family unit actively supporting each other in certain ways, in different ways, until the wound of that trauma somehow stabilizes and heals in a particular way. What we tend to do, because we don't know sometimes, is that when a trauma visits a family, we kind of sit in our corners and handle our wounds alone, and that creates more depth in the wound that we're carrying as a family. And what we need to do is to pull together and mourn together until the wound kind of stabilizes. The other thing that creates trauma in families is divorce, how we handle divorce more than anything else, because divorce is not, it's how we handle divorce these days. We maim each other, we wound each other, we kill each other, we drag each other, you know, and that creates wound more so to the children, and it has a way of destroying the family unit or destroying children who speak for the next generation in a family unit. And we also need to pay attention in terms of how we fight when we are handling a divorce situation, because it has an element of leaving a very bad imprint in the family unit. One of the things, some of the things we adopted, I didn't finish this, we adopted in during apartheid, which we still are stuck in, is would be the drive towards migration and modernization, because what it did was a lot of parents go and look for work elsewhere. And what it does is sometimes children are left behind to fend for themselves, or they're raised by grandparents, or they're raised by neighbors. What it does is it creates an absent parent phenomenon, which we're still stuck in it. We are still stuck in it. And it also requires families as well to be intentional about how do we remove this so that it doesn't form a pattern in our family. There's a bigger drive these days in terms of more and more parents are more intentional about taking their children with, or when they get married, they marry with their children. It was much more deeper in the olden days, because if we are child, they would leave their children behind and go get married, and then the children would be left motherless or fatherless because the other parent is gone. But it's an imprint that left absent parents, because that's how we saw people can live without the other parent, because we were forced into that particular template of parenting or kind of living, which creates more problems. And we still have not looked at what our parents went through. I do know a lot of parents that went through a lot of psychological trauma, having to be raised without parents around, especially in that era, because then it meant being tossed from one family to the next. But when we meet in person, we will unpack these things more in detail. I'm looking at my notes. I have my notes here next to me. I think it's almost everything that I wanted to talk about. Time, yes, time. Okay, so what I want to say is, in closing, let me just check comments before I close. So Deborah says, also connecting the dots from the little family history I know. Those who were not taken to the mines were taken to work in the fields. Yes. The other thing about that, Deborah, is that those who were taken to the fields, they had their identity completely removed. Their names were changed, their surnames were changed, and everything that's about them got removed because of the nature of the fields that they were working in. Then they were given the names of Opas Babo. So that's quite notable. And Deborah says, my grandfather used to yell that my mom and siblings have a history of 9 years. That's the age he started working in the fields. Oh my word, that's deep. So he started working at the fields at 9 years of age, right at his formation. So by the time he got home, he's not the man he was supposed to be, but the man that was created by a system. And as such, these are the grandparents that, in fact, these are the grandparents that raised our parents. And when we talk about some of the wounds that our parents have, it also speaks to that as well. And as such, we still have a lot more to work on based on that and the remnants of that history and eradicating that from our family units. I'm checking other comments. I'm thinking about my family history and I'm getting clarity. Thank you. Happy. So one of the things that I did, because I love this work, was to create a space for parents. And 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 usually I'll do this for free, but it's a lot of work because what I've done in my family is different from what you do in your family, but there are certain similarities in terms of when we work with kids or when I work with children, there's been a few instances where it helped me to understand the year the parents were born. And it helped me to explain to the kids more about their parents based on the years that they were born. Because a lot of the children will say, I don't understand why my mom is always so angry. Or the kids will say, I don't understand why my mom, nothing ever pleases her. Or I don't understand why my dad is just so quiet, even though he's at home. He never talks to us. He never has any conversations with us. He's just bland and there. And so when I ask the kids, which year was your dad born? They will tell me, which year was your grandfather born? They will tell me, was your dad raised by Baba Wake? Sometimes they will say yes, or sometimes they will say no. Then I'll say, if Baba Wake was around and he was born in the 1930s, he is the father who came home angry and destroyed by the apartheid system, that he had nothing to give to the child or the family unit. And therefore your father experienced fatherhood based on that. He doesn't know any better. That's all that he knows. He doesn't even know where to start, depending on age and the era they were born in. They don't know where to start. There's a difference now with the men who are fathering now, because they're more aware and they're able to look back and say, something must have died with our fathers. Oh, actually, our fathers were not even there, and I don't want that for ourselves. So it takes knowledge of history, of your family history, for you to be able to say, I'm not going to raise my children this way because this is not who we are as a family, but this is what we were given by the system, and this is how it impacted our family unit, and therefore we'll change it. If you're raising a child, you need this knowledge in terms of you sitting and having all of this knowledge down. You can either do it through to us in terms of the Facebook page where we have parents, but sometimes they don't want to fight about payments and stuff. So do it on your own and just sit down and have conversations around your family history. I'm going to say one last thing when it speaks to family history, because sometimes people battle in terms of who do I then talk to about my family history? And I love saying this, talk to the one person in your family that everyone hates. The person who knows your family history is the one person in your family that everyone does not want to talk to, that everyone has labeled either as Igosha, Umtakati, or not, or that one person who's labeled as uneducated, unimportant. That's the person that knows your family history. That's the person that knows your family history. And the challenge that you will have to do is you will have to wade through the emotional imprint that has made this person labeled in a particular way. The only way that you're going to know yourself and your children knowing themselves is through that person. And life is very, very wise in how life does it, in that there's always going to be one living person who has access to the information that you need. It can be that one person, it can be a neighbor, it can be, there's always a person. Before a generation closes and wraps up, life is very, very wise. There's always a person who knows the information that you need for your existence or for the next phases of your life. There's always going to be one person. The last thing about it is that I'm going to say we have some spiritual connotations to it, so please accept. A lot of the time, the process of family restoration requires physical interaction with your family. This means that at some point in time, if you grew up in a Joburg and your roots are a KZN, at some point you need to get in a car and go. Or if you grew up say you grew up in Zambia and your roots are somewhere in Evander, it would need you to get up and go, because sometimes the work of family restoration is practical work. You get up and you go, but you need to know when to go as well, and such. And also a big part of family restoration would require from you that you become emotionally ready to undertake it. It's emotional work. And it's not an easy work, it's emotional work. It's also spiritual work. It's also mental draining work. When I was doing my own family restoration, understanding of my family and stuff, it took, I think I was 18 years of age when I started. From 18 years of age, I took breaks at some point. It was like, your family has got so much drama, so much deep history, and so much deep crazy stuff in my family. So I took breaks, and then I was signing myself up with a psychologist and just unpack. How can you just vent and talk? And then I'll go back to putting things together. Because I found people are afraid of family history because they suffer that thing of, what if I'm not the person that I think I am? And this speaks to surnames and clan names and whatnot and whatnot. So people are always afraid of those things, of finding out what the thing that I'm calling myself by might not be what it is. But that's the nature of where we are coming from. We are coming from an apartheid system that removed a lot of things from our families, our names, our clans, our tribes, our bloodlines. It removed everything in terms of bloodline, in terms of tribes. But what it did not remove is change it, but we name ourselves as something else. But you can get into a space and get into a car and drive to places and get information that will help you to find a way to be at peace with yourself. And lastly, sometimes that work is quite expensive, so Abantu tend not want to do it. What I've learned in my journey is that whoever is tasked to do this work is often provided for financially as well. Always. I remember in the parenting road shows that I've been doing, when I speak about this, and people who are called to be family history keepers, that I'll share more about that another time. And one of the things that I know that's very common is that they're usually the ones who are most gifted with things financially, or there will always be an open line for them financially, because that work needs to be, it's a spiritual thing, that work needs to be compensated. Not compensated, it needs to be supported, because you have to do a lot of things. If you are a Christian, let's say you're a born-again Christian, I would say, the language I would use, I would say those who are called are given the provision for their journey. Simple terms. If we follow the traditional spiritual route, I will be busy well. Abantu parents will give you money or whatever you need, any resource that you need for you to do the work to heal your family. You will be provided, and you will know if it's you and if it's not you. You will know. It's just the way it is. And those that follow, those who are leading, will also know how to support, but they also need to be at a space where they're open to receiving guidance and also to be receiving direction and be able to stay consistent in that space as well. And lastly, one of the things that destroyed and continues to destroy families even now is alcohol, and how alcohol got introduced in our families and the patterns it has created along the years. But that's a conversation for another day. Thank you so much. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? I'm gonna go check Dinewo, what Dinewo is saying. Dinewo says, my family has a lot of hatred. My mom's sister hated her so much that even her husband hates my mom. This led us to resent each other as cousins. We are trying to mend and reconcile. Then my mom's sister passed away in October. Her husband's behavior has deteriorated to a point that he's even fighting to keep our grandmother's estate, even if she's still alive, and his mom. So the thing about these types of wounds in families, sometimes uvela ukuthi ingathi manje sisivunguvungu sente esingena direction, not just anger, that's just on high rate and destructive. It's almost like a self-destructive type of thing. And it's also very infused with self-sabotage. You find that people in families, they want to grow, but they keep sabotaging each other and sabotaging themselves because of the depth of that wound in that family. Those who are Christians would then say that's the space for you to pray a lot for your family, or to come together and pray a lot for that family, or find other ways to look into those depths in a spiritual way. And those who are traditionalists will say, you come together as family, and you do whatever is required in terms of rituals for you to be able to close that gap. It really differs from family to family. What I like about being African is that nothing is uniform, and therefore you can't say there's a one way of dealing and healing all of this. Everything depends on that particular family unit and the things that are in that particular family unit. Thanks, Janelle, for that comment. Someone says, thank you. This is very helpful to go back and study the history of my family and look into the patterns and have tough conversations as we were trained to run away and cut each other. So the cutting each other doesn't work. It doesn't work. What it does is it's going to destroy your kids more than anything else. It doesn't work. The interesting thing about the cutting of each other is that I've seen instances where siblings were just not getting along and they hated each other, hated each other, two siblings. And then they had kids, and then they just were not talking at all, just not interacting. And then the one sibling passes away. What the government does, and this is quite interesting, what the government does when a parent passes away, they look at the next bloodline. It's quite rare that your child will be given to a total stranger. It's quite rare, unless you had a will in place and you wrote everything down. But in most cases, if there's no will or direction in place, your children gets given to the next bloodline, which is the person that is close to your blood as possible. So imagine now your children are given to the one person that you've just never healed that relationship with. They don't know what to do with your kids. The kids don't know what to do with them. It just becomes a mess, a huge mess. And you find when you look at these things that they were fighting about, it was just quite petty things, Therefore, sometimes we laugh at some of the things people fight about in families. They are fighting about a fight in Tonga that they had when they were in high school in 1962. And the other one didn't tell their mother that they were going to go somewhere. And then that one got injured in that fight. And then jiggy, for years, they are not talking. They are not interacting for years. And when you find out, Nilola, this thing, and some of the things can be fixed. Of course, there are things that are really grave that cannot just separate yourself. And in those things, you then have to take the necessary steps. Abagazi, you're on mute, you're on loud, Mama. All right, I'm done. Before I talk the whole night, I'm done. I wanted to check so much for any questions before I close off. Speaking of, I'm not the person that I thought I was. I have embarked on a discovery journey. And the minute I discovered pieces that suggest that I'm not carrying my real identity, I dropped everything and I had to attend to my stock. Not sure if I want to keep. And so I wanted to say it's okay for you to not want to dig any deeper. It's okay, because sometimes I understand that fear, because people are afraid of what if I dig deep and then I find more stuff and then I fall apart. One of the things that I know for a fact, and this is what I speak to young adults when they're in that space of self-journey, is that you will definitely fall apart when you find out information that you didn't think existed. You will fall apart. But like everything else in life, you put yourself together again in a manner that makes sense to you. The whole point of having information is that it empowers you so that you are able to put yourself together in a way that makes sense to you. So when you discover, my surname is not my surname, my clan is not my clan, or actually everything that I thought was everything is not everything, it gives you a space to create the life that you pass on to your children. It gives you space to create. And life in its wisdom will give you ways for you to create so that your children do not have to deal with the things that you're running away from. But at the same time, you can take your time. And you can make a choice to either do it or not do it. That's also okay. No? Okay, Dineo. Let me check on Facebook if there's any comments, and then I'm going to be out. Uzodo uyabuza basiqala kuphi. You start with your parents, mama. If they're not alive, you start with the ones who are alive. You start with your parents, and it differs from person to person. But where you start, in fact. Let me try and put this mic here on the side. This is me closing now. So where do you start? As a person, you say, okay, this is me, Unomveli Sombanga. I was born in 1979, and this is me. I was born 1979, 27 November, and I went to a primary school at Chico Springs and in Bashe and wherever, this is me. Then you ask, who gave birth to me? Okay, my mom, Fezera, gave birth to me. My dad, Uskumboza, gave birth to me. Okay, this is now my unit. Okay, who was I born with? I was born with my siblings. So and so, so and so, so and so, so and so. Okay, now we are a unit. My parents, my mom, who was she born with? So and so, so and so, so and so. Where are they now? Who are they? Okay, I love, this is my unit. From your dad's side, who was he born with? So and so, so and so, and so and so and so and so. This is where you start. It's you start there. You start there. It's as simple as starting there, because sometimes you might not know the surnames and the tribes of their parents, but you know the one who gave birth to you sometimes. And sometimes for some people, that's enough to start with, for you to create then an imprint for the next generations. So some parents, some family units have gone through a lot of trauma that they are completely destroyed. There are families that are completely destroyed. There's not even a trace of them, except for a tombstone somewhere where you have to take a car, take a bus, and get there. And when you get there, you'll find this tombstone with a name, with the surname, with the year, other siblings. And when you check, you realize, oh, actually, some of these people are still alive. This is where we start. Sometimes all you can do is just start anywhere. With what you have, with what you don't have, you just start. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I'm going to share more about you guys joining our parents group. I think it will make sense for me when I'm done with our workbook, so that you see, because we will cover family history, family values, and creating family values. What I found quite weird is that even people are getting married now, they don't talk about which values are we going to raise our children under. More so if the values I'm coming from were all over the place, and there were none. There was just trauma and toxic all over. You have to form your family. More so if you're going to have a blended family, you have to bring all the values on point and form. But that's going to be a topic that we talk about in the parents group. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, Nepalo. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really, 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 really appreciate you joining. I thought it was going to be 30 minutes, it's an hour. I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please have a wonderful evening. So someone asked me today about one-on-one coaching. To be honest, guys, I don't like talking price, because people tend to fight. So the group is the most basic thing, because the group, you pay $9.50 for a month, because my coaching fees are going to take you from 2.5 or so, because it's a lot of work. Because in my case, I'll have to internalize everything that you bring to me, and then I'll have to create the imprint for the wounds in your family and how you can find stuff in there. So it's a lot of work. So choose the group, but there's a fee. Even for one-on-one, I don't mind if you come for one-on-one, but please don't ask me to work for free. I can't. You can do this on your own, but if you need support, then you pay for that support. But this information that I gave you here, it's a good place for you to start. You can start with what I've given you today and see where it takes you. And also because in your bus, if you're called to do this work, you are given the resources for it. So how about you guys? Thanks, Tabila. Thank you, guys.